All right, let's get stuck in, shall we? The major breaking news emerging out of DC tonight. The White House has accused the BBC of purposeful dishonesty and 100% fake news after a Panorama documentary doctored one of President Trump's speeches.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Dear, oh dear. Well, Pinocchio would be proud, wouldn't he? Karoline Leavitt, the President's press secretary, has hit out tonight saying British taxpayers are being, quote, forced to fund a leftist propaganda machine after it was revealed the Beeb had spliced together parts of that Trump speech to make it appear he told supporters to fight like hell before the 2021 Capitol riots. Leavitt told the Daily Telegraph in an exclusive story, this purposeful, dishonest, selective edited clip by the BBC is further evidence they are total 100% fake news. Every time I travel to the UK with President Trump and I'm forced to watch the BBC, it ruins my day listening to their blatant propaganda and lies. Well, the row has now drawn in former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who says he will stop paying the licence fee unless Director General Tim Davie resigns or explains the bias engulfing the broadcaster, quote unquote. And it follows a leaked 8,000-word letter from former BBC Standards advisor Michael Prescott, who accused executives at the Beeb of inaction over mounting evidence of bias, including one-sided Gaza coverage and censorship of the trans debate. Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by the man who broke this story tonight, who is sending shockwaves all across DC and indeed the BBC, the chief US correspondent for the Daily Telegraph, Rob Crilly. Rob, good evening. Thank you for your company. Congrats on a fantastic scoop, first of all. Just tell us how this manifested today, because the original Panorama story was, what, a week or so ago? Why did the White House take so long to come out and comment about the BBC?
I think that's a really interesting question. I know that we were trying all week to get a response. They put out a rather watered down kind of statement, a generic statement. I think other news organisations were chasing the same story. Here's the thing. January the 6th is kind of awkward. Trump likes to talk about how the 2020 election was stolen from him. He's pardoned the January 6th protesters, but he doesn't really want to get drawn into the nitty-gritty of what happened on that day. It wasn't a great look for DC. It wasn't a great look for him as a president. He's made political capital out of some elements of that, and he's moved on. I think if this had been a speech about immigration or the border or the economy, and that had been changed, I think we would have heard from the White House a lot faster and a lot harder.
Big tech has turned your phone into a surveillance device, harvesting your data, tracking your location, and selling your information to corporations. Unplugged built the UpPhone to fight back. It's the only smartphone with hardware-level privacy protection, completely blocking data harvesting at the source. It features a physical kill switch that cuts power instantly when you want to go dark, giving you control big tech took away. Unplugged puts privacy and sovereignty first. The UpPhone is built to British standards, designed to keep your data in your hands with independent servers, its own app center, and no corporate gatekeepers. You can access what you choose. No censorship, no app bans, just freedom. Everyone else is playing by big tech's rules. Unplugged rewrote them. The UpPhone runs on an operating system with 0 backdoors and a firewall that blocks thousands of tracking attempts every single day. The UpPhone includes a host of unique security features. The device can be set to have its memory wiped regularly, and if someone demands your PIN code, well, you can give them a false PIN that will wipe the device. It's called Emergency Reset. Privacy isn't a feature with Unplugged, it is the foundation. To get yours today, click the link in the description now.
Okay, tell us how it happened then, if you don't mind. So you were at the White House today, you spoke to Karoline Leavitt.
That's right. I mean, it was my regular pool day. The Telegraph is part of the White House pool. So as everybody knows, there are now actually new restrictions on journalists operating in the White House. You used to be able to just walk up to Karoline's office and see if she was around and have a word. I made an appointment. I went in, sat down on her sofa, very well appointed. She's moved offices, the fire was roaring, rather cosy atmosphere. And of course, she was well aware of the story. And so as soon as I put it to her that, you know, there were questions to be answered by the BBC, she was only too happy. And she is a very slick operator. She knows how to give a good story. She knows the mind of the president as well. And she delivered, you read the quote there, I think she delivered a real sign of the fury of the White House in her response. And it was rather amusing. I travelled with her to Scotland over the summer, as your Bev Turner did as well.
Yeah.
We didn't stay in the same hotels, but of course you turn on the hotel TV and she was saying she was getting a dose of the BBC that ruined her day.
She went studs up, saying every time I travel to the UK with President Trump and I'm forced to watch the BBC in our hotel rooms, it ruins my day listening to their blatant propaganda. So, I mean, this must come directly from the president.
What people say about Karoline Leavitt is she has a mind meld with the president. Other people in the press shop can't get away with this. They will often say, well, wait for the post on Truth Social. That's how you know what the president is thinking. Karoline Leavitt is in the Oval Office all the time. She really is one of the few people around him who knows what he's thinking at any time. I was in the state dining room today for the visit of Viktor Orban. This would have been my question to the president. You know, what do you make of the BBC editing? So, you know, if you can't get a comment from the president himself, Karoline Leavitt, the press secretary, is the next best thing.
Rob, can I ask you, have the BBC been in and around the White House this week since the Panorama story dropped? And, I mean, who's the... Is it Kathy Kay? They
have a whole slate of reporters. I mean, you also have Gary O'Donoghue, the reporter who got the interview with Trump actually earlier this year.
How have they been this week?
He was at the White House today, I noticed. I don't know if he was in for a meeting, for a dressing down, or quite what. Now, they come and go and do their reporting. They're part of the press pool. They may, for all I know, one of their radio correspondents may have been on Air Force One this evening. I suspect that would have been rather frosty. Remember, the Wall Street Journal is still banned from Air Force One because of their coverage of President Trump and his connections to Epstein. The Associated Press is barred from some events because of their reporting, refusing to use the term Gulf of America. This is a president who bears a grudge.
Can I ask you, President Trump has form suing broadcasters who get up to shenanigans. Of course, ABC, who did a similar thing. They spliced that interview, that 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris during the presidential election last year to make her, the claim was, appear more favourable because her answers were rambling, incoherent, and they just generally made her look better. President Trump wanted billions from that case from ABC. He eventually settled for something like $16 million. Do you think we could see something similar here with President Trump suing the BBC?
That's an interesting question. You know, you never know with this White House. My gut feeling is, I come back to the first point, I don't think they particularly want to relitigate all the events of January the 6th and that speech. I think they're happy to fulminate against the BBC. Do they want all that day's evidence? There are still question marks about what Trump was doing during the day and if he did enough to call off his supporters. My gut feeling is no. But you never know with this president.
Yeah, indeed. Well, it would be a development, wouldn't it? It's President Trump suing the BBC. GB News, Rob, just stick with us, because GB News can also bring you the details of a leaked email to BBC News staff from the new CEO, Deborah Turner. So in this email, this is extraordinary, she's commenting, Rob, on the Panorama story, but the BBC becoming the story and being accused of fake news. In this email from Deborah Turner, she told her staff, quote, "I'm writing to you today because it's always difficult when the BBC becomes a story, as it has in some quarters this week. Like you, I work here because I care passionately about trusted news and impartial journalism. I take pride every day in the quality and consistency of BBC News. You will all have seen the news coverage following the leaking of a letter to the BBC board from Michael Prescott, who is a former advisor to our editorial guidelines and standards committee. You will also be aware that following this week's coverage, the BBC chairman has received a letter from Caroline Leavitt, the chair of the Commons Culture, Media and Sport Committee, seeking reassurance from the BBC. The chairman will be providing a full response on Monday, and this will be shared with you, but I felt it was important for me to come to you as CEO of BBC News before the end of the week." It kind of sounds like she doesn't really take the gravitas of the situation seriously there. I mean, that's my perception.
I was looking at that, waiting for the next page, because I thought that was just the preamble and the introduction to her saying either mea culpa, we've made a terrible mistake, or doubling down and defending the reporting, whatever. I mean, the BBC, I think we've seen time and time again, and I should point out, I'm a fan. I think it does generally good work. That might not be a popular opinion in the studio.
No, I agree, sometimes.
But one of the things they always get wrong is their response to crises like this, and they just can't get out of their own way. She should have said in there, okay, we got caught out, bang to rights. That wasn't edited in a professional manner, and this sort of stuff shouldn't be happening. We've made ourselves a target for the White House, and that's not a good place to be.
Do you think the White House have been aware this week over the domestic issues the BBC's been having? For example, the suspension of Martine Croxall for believing in biological sex. Goodness me, who'd think of that? And also, a few other bits and bobs that have been hanging around the BBC this week.
I hate to tell you this, but I think you've got to shut down here. Trump has just come back from his very successful Asia tour. He had Central Asian heads of state and government at the White House yesterday. You have Viktor Orban today. He's off to Mar-a-Lago to play golf. I think the coverage of Trump, when it's as egregious as that January 6th speech we saw, that comes onto their radar. But I think the ins and outs of a presenter like Martine Croxall, I don't think they will be across.
Okay, just reading some comments here on gbnews.com/you'll say. Ray Rodden, good evening, Ray. You've said, Ben, Karoline was forced to watch the BBC propaganda while in Britain. Just think how we'd be feeling over here as we're forced to pay for it or get mafia-style harassment letters threatening to send the boys round if we don't pay up. Yeah, indeed. And Boris Johnson tonight, Rob, has said he won't be paying the licence fee until Tim Davies steps forward and explains himself.
Well, Karoline did say to me that it was terrible that British taxpayers are being forced to foot the bill for a leftist propaganda machine. So I asked her, I followed up and said, are you saying that British people shouldn't have to pay the television licence fee? She said, well, look, that's a matter of policy. I'll leave that to the president. But Americans are always astounded by the way the BBC is founded. It's a very alien concept. And then to have to watch material that you don't believe in and you're paying for that, I think is a very strange concept for Americans to get their heads around.
Yeah, and look, I think the BBC does, this is my personal view, does some good stuff, particularly on local radio. I appreciate local radio and so on, and there's some good bits, but when you are literally forced to pay, or the heavies are threatened on you, and you see time after time the constant propaganda, and I agree with Karoline Leavitt, it is propaganda. Let's look at the Gaza situation when they went out instantly and said that Israel had bombed the hospital, when in actual fact it was Hamas who had some Duff rockets go off. Time after time, the Hugh Edwards scandal, they were so inept with Hugh Edwards that they didn't have a morality clause in his contract, and he's now claiming his, 300k a year BBC pension despite being a convicted paedophile. We can go on and on and on. So I think there's serious questions about the licence fee, but I won't ask you to wait until.
Well, I was just going to say quickly, I mean, Karoline Leavitt has teed off against the BBC before, and it was about the Gaza coverage back in June when she accused the BBC of essentially swallowing Hamas propaganda, being forced to issue correction after correction after correction because they'd taken a Hamas statement at face value, and then as the facts emerged, things looked rather different.
Well, there we go. That's why GB News are here in Washington DC, and that's why we are here, of course, with you back home in Blighty, the UK's #1 news channel for the 4th month running. Plug, pat ourselves on the back. I will take no hesitation in doing that. And of course, you don't have to pay for us unless you want to be a member and get all the great exclusive access behind the scenes. Anyway, a BBC spokesperson has told GB News tonight, while we don't comment on leaked documents, when the BBC receives feedback, it takes it seriously and considers it carefully.